Right, how's everybody doing? Hope you're excited to get back to training. I just thought I'd make a quick video with the kind of what you should do before you set off to the dojo. Just a quick sort of checklist and the order in which you should do things, and just some tips on looking after the newer bits of your equipment that are specific to COVID-19. Okay, so let's start with what you're going to need. I'm covering this from the perspective of somebody who's in armor. If you're not in armor, you should know what you need. You just need the men mask and your uniform. So don't worry about the shields and things like that. This is a little bit more aimed at people with armor, but it's probably useful for people who don't have armor as well. Okay, so let's just start off with the bags. Got a couple of bags, so I'm using my kitchen to film this, just because it's good light. So I've got a resealable bag. This is for putting your men's shield and your men's mask in, and as well as your tenagri after practice. So when we line up before we ray out, you're going to dismantle the men's shield from your men. Take the tenagri, the men's shield, and place it in this bag, and keep that handy, because when you exit the building you might want to put your mask in this as well. You can bring a separate one for your mask, or it's the last thing the mask is the last thing you're going to remove when you leave the building, so it's up to you how you handle that, but the idea is that you have a container to put those things in to isolate them. I've got a big Tesco reusable shopping bag here. This is a shoe bag. It needs to be something that's pretty robust, because shoes will break bags pretty easily. You need to be able to tie it up. Might be a good idea to label it with your name as well, so because there could be loads of different Tesco bags there. So if you've just got your surname on it or something like that, you know exactly which set of shoes is yours, so you don't have to go hoking around in other people's stuff. That's the point. We don't want to touch other people's goodies. There's two types of men's shield arrangements that you can get. So what you've got is a set with a lower guard. Okay, you can get these from Kendo Star in sets of 3. They're about £8 or £9, I think, including delivery. And then there's a top visor. This one I got from 9 Circles, and it's a bit more expensive. It's, I think, about a tenner. The downside to using the visor, the eye protector and mouth protector, two separate pieces, is the eye visor is quite stiff. It's quite difficult to fit. It's very robust. It's very strong. It's actually designed to stop shin-eye splinters, which doesn't happen because people maintain the shin-eye correctly. So most people don't use these under normal circumstances. This is a normal bit of kit. But when you combine it with the mouth guard from Kendo Star, that is for COVID-19, it gives you a full visor in effect, with a small gap between the eyes and the mouth, just for a bit of ventilation. It's quite a good solution. A little bit more expensive, a bit more difficult to operate. Kids would probably find this a bit too difficult to fit on their own, so they would need adult assistance to be able to use that sort of setup. However, the one that we are issuing as standard from the club is the full face visor from Tosando, and this is much more flexible. It doesn't actually need to be robust because it's on the inside of the mengane. The mengane are the metal bars. Okay, because it sits inside there, it doesn't need to be robust. It's not going to be struck, not even remotely. So it uses a couple different fixing points. You can see there's a vertical one at the top and the bottom, and there's a kind of, etched in kind of edges on the sides. Okay, it sits in absolutely fine. It's very secure, so don't worry about that. Moving on. So you'll have one of either of those. You don't need to have both. Okay, I just have both because I tested both to make sure before we picked one for the club issue that this Tosando one was going to be, the full face one was going to be acceptable. We had some concerns about ventilation, but ventilation is absolutely fine. There's some gaps around the side that let in air, and you draw in air from the bottom anyway. So it's a bit warmer. That's about the height of it. Obviously, tenuguri, freshly laundered tenuguri, you'll need that. And a face mask. You can fashion one out of 2 tenuguri, where you use a cutting from one to make a strap to tie around your head, and then you fold another tenuguri in half lengthways and stitch that up with a strap going across. So you'd have the length of it like that, and the strap going across, and that would sit like that, and kind of down your chest area like this. Okay, pretty effective. Tested by All Japan Kendo Federation. Works well. I'm choosing to go with just this sort of standard mask. When you fit the men and you have the mask on, just be conscious that you need to put the men on correctly, which is to the front of your face. You're not supposed to drag a men onto your head. It's not a helmet, it's a mask. So you tie it to the front of your face. If you pull it over the top like this, it'll pull your mask up and into your eyes. Okay, this type of mask. So what you want to do is just take a bit of extra time, make sure it's seated correctly, make sure you haven't bumped your mask up, and then attach it to your face and tie it up, and you should be good to go. Okay. You need a towel, and it needs to be quite a large towel. Okay. This towel is pretty substantial. Okay. You know, it's a good long towel. This is going to be your seating area, your makeshift seating area. The idea is that when you set up your gear in the dojo, that the only part of your body that should touch the ground when you're working with your equipment is your feet. And that's because your feet are going to touch the floor during practice regardless. So there's no point in worrying about your feet. But what you want to do is make sure that things like your kote, if you're having to work on your kote, or maybe you need to do something to adjust your shinai, you maybe need to set out your tenuguri, or, various little bits and bobs like that, handle the bags, anything like that. You want to be able to do that on the towel. That's your safe space. It's freshly laundered, you know it's clean. So when you lay it down, you're going to lay it down in such a method that you keep the top surface, when you're not using it, you fold the top surface in on itself, so that it's protected by the towel itself. That way, if people are moving around the dojo and things like that, you don't have a concern of, oh, what if some sort of droplet or aerosol spray or something like that landed on the top surface of my towel. The idea is when you come back to the end of the session, you unfold the towel and there's a fresh surface there that only you have had contact with. And we're going to distance those spaces that you line up in so that there's no concern that somebody else accidentally touched your towel. Okay, so that's the purpose of the towel. Obviously, make sure you've got your armor, kote, men, tare and do. Okay, and lastly, what you want to do is, obviously, this is your bogu bag. I've used, you need a bag to line the inside of this. Okay, so I've used a refuse bag, black garbage bag. The reason is because it's got a large aperture, large enough to fit bogu in. The idea is I've lined the inside of this bag. Now mine opens from the side, so it's a bit awkward to kind of show you. Obviously bags that open from the top might be a little bit simpler, but the idea is when you finish training, you're going to isolate your bogu. You're going to consider this as contaminated. Okay, so you're going to put that all in there. Okay, and when you take it home, you can take it out and lift the entire thing out of your bogu bag, so your bogu bag doesn't have any chance of contagion on the inside. Now, fabrics only have a half-life of around about 3 hours, depending on the fabric. But many bogu bags are made of synthetic fibers, which are based in plastics. So the half-life is probably going to be longer on there. Whereas something like your towel, the half-life is generally only 3 hours, but you're going to launder that anyway. You're going to launder the mask, and you're going to launder the tenuguri. And after each practice, you're going to have to clean these down. So I recommend just a couple of squirts of antibacterial spray, front and back, just to give it a good wipe down. That'll leave streaks, so you're going to need to get rid of that, and you want to stop it from fogging. Okay, make yourself a dishwashing liquid solution, couple of, maybe a tablespoon worth of dishwashing liquid like Fairy or something like that. Fill it up with water, don't let it bubble. Just get a nice clean, even mixture like this, okay? If it's green, if it's the color of the washing liquid, it's potent enough. All you need to do is squirt some of that onto the surfaces, get yourself some kitchen towel or a microfiber cloth, just something that's soft enough that it won't scratch the visor, and you're going to just buff that in. Okay, so the disinfectant is going to kill anything that happens to be on there. This solution is to stop it fogging and have a streak-free surface. Okay, so when you apply it quite liberally and just buff it until it's dry on both sides, and you'll get a clear visor. And then when you go to fit this in your men, then just be careful that you only handle it from the outside edges, or handle it maybe with some gloves on or something like that, so that you don't get fingerprints all over it, because that would be quite annoying if you start Kendo and you're like, oh, I can't see a damn thing because, excuse the language, I can't see a thing because there's fingerprints all over my visor. Okay, that is your main checklist for having everything you need to enter the dojo. We have requested everyone bring their own hand sanitizer, but we have 3 sanitizer stations set up inside the dojo. So there's one on the main hall floor that people can have quick access to, that's near the first aid station, and we have another in the front hall. So the idea is get dressed at home, make sure you've got all this kit, so you're in your hakama and keikogi before you set off for the dojo. When you arrive at the dojo, get your mask on when you're in the queue outside. So have a socially distanced queue and get your mask on there so that when you walk in the hall, you already have your mask on. First thing you're going to do is there's going to be someone there kind of managing the entry into the dojo. So it's going to be one at a time. You walk in, you remove your shoes. You put your shoes in your shoe bag. You put your shoe bag onto the shoe rack. You disinfect your hands, enter the dojo. There'll be allocated spots. There'll be another person there helping to lead the session that will lead you to a spot. Okay, because obviously people are going to come in different orders and arrive at different times. If you could actually line up at the door in rank order, that would be easier. It'll be faster for us. But we accept that not everyone's going to arrive at the same time, so it might not be practical. But the idea would be, ultimately, if we could, highest rank enters the dojo first, and that way they can help us have other people enter, but it also means they can get to the correct side of the room without having to tread over ground that you're going to use to sit in. That would be ideal. You can move in front of people who are putting their armor on. Normally, etiquette dictates you need to go behind. Under these circumstances, you can walk down the middle of the room so that you don't have to go close to someone who's trying to put on armor or something like that. Okay. See if there's anything else. That would probably be about it. So yeah, bring your own hand sanitizer, but we do have some there. We have some precautions there. We have antibacterial wipes for anyone who needs to borrow club weapons. We can wipe those down. We have antibacterial sprays and things like that. One last thing to mention is if you have a foot blister from training, you will have to stop training unless you can guarantee that you can wrap that in a way where it's not going to be a problem. The main source of transmission that we can't guarantee against is the floor, and we practice bare feet. That's not normally a problem because your feet are very far away from your head. But if you've got a foot blister and you ignore it, obviously the normal operator's mandem in Kendo is, I don't want to give up. I don't want to, I don't want anyone to think less of me because I said I couldn't continue because of a tiny little foot blister. But now a tiny little foot blister is a critical issue. So for your health and everybody else's health in the community, if you have a foot blister, session's over for you. Mitori Keiko from there on out. Okay. You have permission to bandage your foot, put your socks on, put shoes on if you have to. You can stay and watch the rest of the session. We're not going to kick you out. We're not horrible that way. But it's too high of a risk. Okay, hopefully that won't come up a lot. We've got quite a good smooth floor. It's very seldom people get blisters unless they're complete beginners, so we're quite lucky that way. But it's being said because there have been members in the dojo before who have let those things go until they rupture and they bleed on the floor. That will not be acceptable anymore. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else. So just roughly the procedure when you finish up. You go back to your line at the end of the session. You unfold your towel. Take seiza or tateiza. Tateiza is a kneeling position if you can't take seiza. Obviously, set your shinai down. Remove your kote. Remove the men. Straight away, first thing you want to do is get the tenugui and men shield into your Ziploc bag. Okay. Next thing you probably want to do is start to pack the kote, the men, tare do. All of that comes off together. Normally we don't take the door and the tare off until we've done the formalities at the end. All the armor is going to come off. Okay. Obviously that goes then into your bag with a bin liner. Okay. And then we're going to treat weapons a little bit differently, so you may or may not have your weapon. Just because you're putting your armor away doesn't mean you're putting your shinai away, is what I'm trying to say. But it's probably going to be that most of the time that is the case, because we tend to finish off the sessions in armor. So the shinai will be stored in the weapons bag before we bow out. But generally speaking, when you turn up at the dojo, normally what we would do is we would have the bokuto, the shinai, all of that ready to go to try and obviously save time, and you don't want to keep coaches waiting or people hanging about. This time it's different. You leave your weapons in your weapon bag until instructed otherwise. Okay. So at the beginning of the session, whoever's running the session, or senpai, sensei or senpai, will tell you, this is what we're doing, have this ready. And it will usually be after we bow in. But yeah, we'll manage that as we get there. And that's about it really. So once the gears are packed away, you've packed away your shinai, packed away your bogu, you've got your men shield, the mask and the tenugui in your Ziploc bag. You're going to sanitize your hands so that you don't touch anything else. You don't touch your face, you don't fiddle with things. When you take your tenugui off as well, the custom is to wipe your face down. Think about bringing a spare tenugui for that purpose. Don't take the one that's on your head and wipe your face down. Okay. The risk is pretty low that something's going to come in the men's shield and travel up on top of your head like this. But it still just seems like it's a good course of action to probably have a backup and use that dry one to wipe your face if you need to. But definitely, certainly before you put your hands anywhere near your face, use your hand sanitizer. So it makes sense to do all those other bits first and then do that bit last. Whereas traditionally when we take off the men, the first thing we do is wipe our face before we actually take the men away from our face. So there's going to be a bit of change of habit there that people need to think about, but that's what we've got to do. Once all the gear's packed away, then you stand in your spot and you wait for gore. Gore is, the formalities before and after. Once that's completed, then the senpai will start to lead people out. You'll exit the building lowest to highest rank. We're asking 4 people to stay behind each session total, should we have the numbers, to do things like clean the floor, wipe down certain surfaces that we know have been used, or that have likely been used, even if we don't know that they have been used. And then the most senior members will exit last. That's going to be the way of it. The next bit of this video that I'm going to tackle then is just a quick rundown of how to fit these visors. One of them is harder to do than the other. but they're all pretty straightforward. So in fact, I'll just do it all in one here. This is like a cooking video or something like that. Okay, so we'll start with the Tozondo, the flexible visor, the full face one. They're pretty affordable if you need to buy them on their own. Everyone, it seems, in our club uses sets that have men that use 14 mengane. So you just count the number of mengane. You go to Tozondo or 9 circles, you can buy these. Tozondo have many different sizes for kids in Japan and stuff like that. But 9 circles just have a sort of standard adult size, and it turns out everyone in our club seems to use that. So as I say, under normal circumstances, you don't really want to handle it by the middle because you don't want to get fingerprints in there. But just to give you a rough idea, it flexes into place. So you kind of want to fold it like this into a tube. Set the bottom in first. And you're going to obviously line up the vertical slats with the vertical bar. So it's just going to sit in the lowest position it can. Okay, and it just pushes through, it flexes into place. Okay. And mine sort of sits, the bottom one kind of sits, if you can kind of see this, it sits in its second position, second bar down. Okay. Top one's not quite seated correctly, so I'll fix that. Okay, so that's the top one seated. Okay. And what you end up with let's see if I can get this so you can see it. Okay, so that's kind of what you end up with. Okay, so you can see that there's some gaps at the top for breathing. There's a little bit of breathing space from the sides. Okay. So they're not too bad. It's going to get warm, so we're going to keep practice pretty sparing. Okay, we're not going to, particularly in the beginning, we're not going to start off with loads of kakari keiko and butsukari keiko and all the really, oikomi keiko, all the really intense stuff. We'll ramp back up to things and see how we go. Usual rules apply. If you start to feel like you can't cope, there's no shame in stopping. Just raise your hand. Everyone should know the drill for that by now anyway. But the key is going to be turning up hydrated and ready to go. By the way, to remove this, I mean, it's pretty easy to just pull out. Again, you just need to kind of flex it a bit and pull the top or bottom out first, and it will be able to flex its way out. They're pretty robust. Okay, so the second arrangement, which is the lower shield and upper shield, these are a bit more tricky. They're a little bit less flexible. So same thing again, you are just going to flex things into place. So you're going to have the bottom curved surface like this, and these are going to sit at the top, these cutouts. Okay, same thing. This one you don't really need to mind it. Well, you don't need to worry about if you get your fingers on it so much because it's not in your field of vision. It doesn't disturb your field of vision. Okay, so just grab it, flex it. So it's nice and curved. You can be pretty firm and robust with these. Okay, and then just see that it should, you'll feel that there's a natural position that it sits where it's level on both sides. And for me, that position is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bars up is where the cutouts sit. Okay. So there. Okay. And then for the eye visor, This would be the most difficult one. Trying to get you a view of this, but it's going to be a bit trickier. Okay, so we only have 2 cutouts of this, but this is a lot more stiff for a reason. Because as I say, it was originally designed for the intention of, for people who are worried about shinai coming apart, which doesn't really happen in the field because people maintain their shinai properly and it doesn't come apart. So, but people still stock these, so handy enough. So again, it's got a bit of flex, but not enough that you can feasibly do that with one hand. Okay, so you have to do it with 2 hands. There is no real option for that. And really the best way to do this is to get it kind of seated on the menbuchi here and just push it through and wiggle it until you get to a place where it's almost through. And then we're just going to kind of start to focus on one side more than the other. So I'll do the right side first. Okay, so that snaps into place. The second one snaps into place. And you can see that it's quite robust. Okay, so it's not going to break on you or anything like that. Okay, so what you end up with then is a slight overlap, which is correct, where the eye visor is slightly behind the mouth guard. Okay, and it clicks into place 1, 2, 3 bars, between 3 and 4 from the top. Okay, and it relies on being less flexible to stay in, so it's exerting more pressure on the main gunny. So this would be the most robust setup. It's also the most breathable setup. So it's a little bit cooler. So the gap at the top is larger, and there's a gap midway down here. This also makes it a little less tricky to manage for fogging, but it doesn't matter because if you're using your fluid, then both setups are absolutely fine for fogging. But as I say, it's quite difficult to flex it into place, so we wouldn't recommend that for kids, only for adults. Okay, that is the most complicated bit really to manage. So obviously, as I say, when you get that home, you need to remove these, and it's the removal side of the dual shield setup that makes it a bit tricky. And that's why we picked the full face shield as standard for handing out to people at the dojo. But you're free to source your own depending on your preference. My personal preference is probably the 2-piece setup, but I'm absolutely 100% content to use the single face setup as well. So it'll probably just be a case that I might rotate them. That's my personal preference. Just because I happen to have both available, I'll probably rotate them. And I'll play with it for a while and see if I really find a massive difference, and I might stick with one over the other. But so far during testing, I haven't seen a massive difference. So that's it really. That's literally how you arrive at the dojo, what you need to do on your way in, how to find your place, get started. Just listen to the instructors who are there, and we'll walk you through it. We also want to encourage people that there's no rank when it comes to this stuff, when it comes to safeguarding. So if one of the kids says to me, "Sensei, you forgot to sanitize your hands there after fixing my shinai for me," that would be great. That would be really helpful. So no one will take offense, and they can say it to anybody in the club if they see it. So as I said, there is no rank with this. It's too important. So anyone sees something that doesn't make sense in the context of COVID-19, they speak up no matter who it is. No one can take offense from it. That's the culture we want to establish in the club. But to get everyone started, the coaches will keep everybody on the right track initially. We'll go step by step. We'll have a little bit less training time as a result because we'll spend a bit more time getting this right. But once people are comfortable with it, we'll be used to it, we'll know the procedure, and hopefully we can get to something like normal training fairly quickly. Okay, hope to see you all soon. I'm really looking forward to it. First session's on Saturday. We're looking like a 1:30 start at the moment, as opposed to 2 o'clock. This is because Iaido and Jodo technically don't get enough time. There's having a session finish at 4 o'clock, and Iaido and Jodo have to start from 4 and finish at 5. It takes about 15 minutes for the Kendoka to get out. People like to chit chat, ask questions, things like that. It's just not feasible, it isn't working out. So we need to create a gap there. So we're probably going to bump the Kendo session to 1:30 to 3:30 and keep Iaido and Jodo as 4 to 5. It gives us, particularly with COVID-19, more time and flexibility. It gives us half an hour for the Kendoka to make a good exit, and for anyone running the EI session to be able to give a bit of a disinfectant spray to the floor, which is quite important for Iaido because they have no choice but to touch the floor with their hands sometimes. It's just for picking up the swords and things like that. So we will get there, we will get used to it, but really looking forward to seeing everyone. So I hope you can all make it. If anyone's got any questions, now's the time. Okay, because we get started pretty soon. Oh, and one more thing, make sure your insurance is up to date. Your Kendo-bu, Iaido-bu, Jodo-bu, BKA membership, that's got to be up to date. If you don't have that and you don't have your form from the document that we sent out, the PDF in the article last week, we can't let you into the dojo. It's too important. So we need those things. So let's talk about when you get home and you've already disassembled your men's shield. You've cleaned that down with disinfectant and use some anti-fog to prepare it for the next session, as I talked about earlier. And you've washed your keikogi, you've laundered your tenugui, all that's taken care of. So what about the men itself? If you want to clean that down and disinfect it, the best way is to use, is just to let it dry out, generally speaking. This blue dye, if you've got the kind of dye where you've used it and your bogger has turned your hands blue, when you first bought it, and it turns your shinai blue and things like that, that means you have Aizome dye, the traditional Japanese indigo dye. That has antibacterial properties in it, so that's why when it's properly dried it doesn't stink. That being said, a lot of salt and sweat does sort of get caught in the fabric, so it's quite an old solution. It's not foolproof. So yeah, if you want to clean down your men and give it a bit of a disinfectant before the next training session, you'll need some kind of isopropyl solution. You usually mix it to be quite mild, maybe about 70% of its normal strength. That's one way to do it. If you can't get a hold of that, then I'm going to show you just a different technique. Basically, you don't want to get too much disinfectant on the Aizome dye because it will break it down. That will start to do two things. It will stop performing its function, but it'll also start looking pretty bad. It'll start getting patchy and blotchy and things like that, and you won't be able to resolve it. So I'm going to use just this all-in-one disinfectant spray. Now this is for sort of surfaces and all that kind of thing, so it's a bit too strong, but I'm going to negate that by spraying it from far away. The other thing I'm going to do is just wipe the inside surfaces with a damp cloth. So wet your cloth and wring it out. Okay, and all you need to do is just give it a wipe. You don't want to soak the inner surfaces. Okay, all you want to do is get any of that salt that's kind of stuck in there in the fabric on the surface to transfer across to the cloth. And you can go down and you can wipe all the surface, the Minbuchi surface. You can wipe the ago, inside of the mendare. The mendare are the flaps. Okay. Take a bit of time to wipe down the chin guard. Can't remember what it's called in Japanese. But give that a good wipe because that tends to be the gunkiest place. Even the inside of the mengane. Okay, it's a good idea to give that a wipe. And the outside of the mengane, you can give those a wipe. Okay. Thing about the outside of the mengane, if you want to clean them, disinfect them in any way, you can just use an antibacterial wipe. That will suffice. It won't need a lot of attention. Okay, so I'm going to basically just give this one evenly distributed spray from way back here. Okay, so this is what a good at least 30 centimeters, maybe even more. Just okay, a 1 second burst like that. Maybe a bit extra for the top because I missed it. Okay, that's it. That's all you need to do. Set that down to dry. Okay, when you dry your men, okay, all you want to do is lay it down on a nice flat surface. So I'm going to be filming everything in my kitchen just because it's good light, but right, like that. That's all you need to do. Okay, don't set it down face down. Okay, seems counterintuitive, but this is the very best way for it to dry. Okay, after training. So we're presuming that your men is still sweaty and wet. And the reason is because you don't want moisture traveling from this way. If you flip it over upside down, gravity is going to kind of work it into this. Okay. This rawhide needs to stay dry. If it gets wet, the mengani can detach. Okay. Usually that's more important when you're actually washing them in. Okay. And as I say, you can give the mengani, the bars, just a bit of a wipe down with antibacterial wipe, and that should do. The kote, they're a little bit of a different ball game. You can do very much the same sort of thing. You know, if you want to, you can pat these down with a damp cloth. You know, you can give them a spray on the inside. I wouldn't really spray the palms if it was me, I have to be honest. I would just leave these to dry, and just exercise a bit of discipline that anytime you handle your kote, that afterwards you're going to disinfect your hands. Okay, you're going to use antibacterial wipe when you finish handling these. The reason is because if you spray alcohol, isopropyl alcohol or something like that onto the palms of the kote, it'll make them stiff, and then they're more likely to start breaking up and developing little holes and things like that. Okay. The other thing you can do to look after your kote is make sure your fingernails are trimmed. The most common way to damage the inside of the part where the palms attach to the glove itself is by having kind of long edges or sharp edges on your nails. So take care of that. The other thing is just to make sure that you always dry these out. Okay, if these dry well, then they're generally good to go. But make no mistake, these are a breeding ground for germs. Okay, so when you finish using kote and you put them away, clean your hands. Okay, there's just no shortcut around that. Okay, and avoid touching your face, that sort of thing. Okay, I think that covers that. So that's rough guide to what you need to do for COVID-19 for looking after your men and your kote. Hope that's helpful.